Hi everyone, thank you for attending today's webinar. The webinar today will be focused on data sharing and specifically on one of the DAFNI program's projects called DINI, which stands for Data Infrastructure for National Infrastructure. This project was led by Dr. Brian Matthews, who leads the data engineering theme in the scientific computing department and leads the DAFNI program. I will hand over to Brian, who is going to take you through the background of the project and its results and recommendations.
Thank you, Lindsay. I will share my screen. Whoops, I'm going to make sure I'm on the right one. There we go. Okay, can you see that? We're just coming through. There, can you see that?
Yeah, we can see that.
Great. Okay, well, thank everyone for joining today. Yes, as Lindsay said, I'm going to talk about a major project that we ran up until March this year, called Data Infrastructure for National Infrastructure. And I'll explain this is, from our point of view, very much an exploratory study to see how we might, what we might do in the future and how we might change and how we might actually support future activities. So it's looking at very much at requirements. So I shall start with a bit of sort of recap, a bit of background about what DAFNI is there for, what we've been trying to do over the last years. And what we've been doing is working very much in the area of infrastructure systems research. So academic research on planning, designing, operating infrastructure systems, such as water, distribution, energy supply, transport networks, but also telecommunication networks, waste disposal network systems, and various other parts of the built environment, the economic environment that we're working in, and how that interacts with other things around us, like the natural environment or the social and economic environment. And what researchers are looking for are, to develop novel approaches and insights on how we design such systems better, how those systems work together across systems, and their impacts on the world around on the wider world around us, so we can investigate how those things may develop, and then ultimately, why these things are ultimately of interest to policymakers is these can contribute to strategic goals. So economic growth, how we're going to develop the economy, how we're going to do that in an environmental sustainable way, particularly in a program working towards net zero, and how we develop those systems to be resilient and secure, to give us that assurance that those systems are going to be fit for purpose in the future. So all this research going on. So some of the examples on the right hand side are some of the projects we've been involved in. I won't go through them, but it's sort of air transport, in energy, and in integrating different systems together. But all these systems rely on good data, and that data mostly comes from the operational data that industrial utilities, for example, generate in their operations, and that government collect. Some data comes from other research, but a lot collected by other researchers or derived by other researchers. But a lot of data, a lot of the data that such research is dependent on comes from government and industry. And we need to take that data, integrate it together, make it, and then integrate it also with that data coming from those related environmental and social linked areas. So there's a large kind of data element that underpins this systems engineering research. So what we're doing in DAFNI, our one pager that we have describing what DAFNI does is provide a platform that people can collaborate together to improve their decision making in their research. And so people collaborate on research questions. They can work with their partners in industry, in policymakers and utility providers, and share data models on the platform in our database. They can provide the models for execution in the data store, and then provide workflows to explore the particular scenarios to look at those outputs and those what the results they want to look for. And again, yet more examples of where we are applying this on the right-hand side. Some of these I'll talk about a little bit more later. Uh, what we do as a platform is very much kind of user driven. So what we are doing is um, uh, the data on the platform, the data that we provide in National Infrastructure Database is very much determined by what problems that people want to solve. So people bring data to the platform or ask us to require data for their purposes. They will share it amongst their collaborators and indeed potentially across all the users of the platform. But it is very much driven, the data collection, which is now getting quite extensive, is actually very driven by what those user needs are. What we're not doing at the moment anyway is a sort of systematic bringing on of data to the platform from different sources to make it generally available. We're not that reference data collection. So what we're looking at is should we provide more support for reference data collections? And this brings us on to the whole question of data sharing. And the community as a whole has been struggling with what data sharing means in this community. How can we get shared data, particularly that data comes from operational data from industry? How can we share it and make it available for researchers in a sort of systematic and general, so people can find data, access data, and then use it within their systems? And this has been obviously been thought about for quite a long time. We looked back in time, so to a report in the National Infrastructure Commission did in 2017, where they did a major study, where they commissioned Deloitte to do a major study actually to look at the types of barriers you might get in data sharing across the whole infrastructure community, not just in research, but across the whole community. And they came up with a summary of 5 types of barriers um, which are stopping people from sharing data. Some of them are very much legalistic, legislative and legalistic, things like GDPR, but also contracts and data sharing agreements, data sharing security. So where is the security or those restrictions aren't going to be respected? So you get security breaches and leaks of data. Commercial barriers that it seems to be expensive to share data. So you have to do extra work to make it available. So why do it? Cultural barriers. This can just be the habits and the attitudes particularly when it comes to research. Research is something might not be a main concern of the organisation, and they don't really have the systems in place or the habits in place or the policies in place to actually support data sharing. And then there's the technical one. So the technical one, the barriers, which are the mechanisms, the formats, actually accessing data, are actually the fifth of this list, and often the earlier ones actually um, sort of can prevent are more important than the technical barriers. Not the saying the technical barriers aren't very significant, but the other ones tend to get in the way first. Now, this was 2017. Things have changed since 2017. There is perhaps much more awareness of the benefits of data sharing now. There have been quite a lot of initiatives to systematically deliver data. So I quote 2 on this slide, which have appeared over the last few years. One is the London Data Store. So a systematic effort from the Mayor of London's office to provide a portal into huge amounts of data on London across all kinds of different sectors, and Stream, another portal which has appeared from the water industry, which is trying to collect and publish data from across, not everyone, but most of the UK's water companies are involved in that and are publishing data through Stream now. There are similar initiatives in Ofgem and data around energy industry. So there's lots of these portals appearing. So there are perhaps more data sources available. So what's changed in 2017? do we need to do more, particularly to support researchers, and how can we use that data to better deliver our impact to data to government and society at large? So what we've been doing, well, been talking with the Department of Science, Innovation, Technology, our funding department, who over the last 2 years have sponsored a pilot initiative to understand the needs for a UK research data cloud. This has been mooted over several times that there should be a broad underpinning infrastructure to support UK research in sharing and access to data. So DC, particularly at that point, were very interested in seeing how that might work. So they put up a pilot study. Well, they sponsored some pilot studies. We were lucky enough to win one, and we amongst another 3 others were sponsored as well. Uh, uh, so, and what we were looking at particularly was what are the requirements, impact to support data sharing and analysis data across national infrasystems with a focus on energy, water, transport, and related natural, built and social and economic environments. Very broad, potentially a very broad study. We felt that we needed to concentrate on particular sectors, energy, water, and transport, still very, very broad. So we were trying to be representative rather than comprehensive. But so what we've been doing over the last year is this really a very, very intense period of activity trying to do this study. It was in sort of 4 parts. We did some solution-based analysis, so we did a lot of discussing with the community to try to identify barriers and benefits to data sharing and exchange. We then used that to do some design studies to recommend best practices particularly to enable fair publication of data and how we handle it inside our infrastructure systems like DAFNI or other platforms. We then sponsored some demonstrators looking at how data sharing affects particular research cases, in some particular use cases of research, we sponsored a number of research projects, and then benefits realization. We tried to draw that all together into a study. This proved to be quite large and quite a large study, but also quite a short one. So we asked a number of partners to join us in this, particularly the Energy Data Centre from the UK Energy Research Consortium's UK Energy Data Centre, the Centre for Environmental Data Analysis, particularly the Jasmine superdata cluster that's in the environmental space, the Digital Creation Centre, UK CRIC, so the UK Collaboratorium for Research, Information and Cities, and we asked a consultancy company to join us as well to do some landscaping analysis and Icebreaker. We worked with Icebreaker one, and then we also sponsored quite a significant 11 in total research studies. So we involved quite a large number of people there, and particularly between last summer, about a year ago, and March, this has been a very intensive period of activity for us, and we've done an awful lot of work. So to give a flavour of that, we held a whole series of roadshows and workshops. We ran 3 workshops around the devolved nations in Swansea, Glasgow, and Belfast, and an energy sector workshop working with SMEs in Abingdon, working with the Digital Creation Centre. Icebreaker One had done a lot of literature reviews and surveys and interviews themselves. UCRIC did 2 workshops looking with their research leaders and with urban observatories. And Energy Data Centre looked at particularly energy data modelling. And we also sponsored 3 what we call champion studies with members of our strategy board to do particular detailed studies in particular areas. So Liz did a study in water systems leakage data. Giuliano and Daniel did a study on near real-time transport data. So this is not live feeds, but close to live feeds, data on transport, which is sort of an hour or updated at sort of hour or 2 hourly intervals. And then Sam Gunner did and Theo Tronis did a study on urban mobility. The amount of activity in this project was quite large, so I'm not going to go through it all in detail, but I will pick out a few examples of things that you can follow up. All the information about this stuff is all available, and we're making it available through our website. And there'll be lots of pointers to where you can find out much more information about all these activities. So just to pick a few things we did, Icebreaker 1 did a landscaping review. They produced 2 reports. Firstly, initially a review of literature, particularly grey literature. So previous attempts to look at surveys and studies and reviews into data sharing in this area, particularly on how it's affected research, and produced a really interesting report on highlighting benefits and good practices and barriers, and taking things from looking at what we've done elsewhere. And after that, they then completed the sort of original landscaping report, if you like, with some surveys, workshops, interviews, and they produced a report on that. So that's the second of these 2 reports in this shown in this page, where they produced their own recommendations as well, which we fed into our recommendations. These are 2 really interesting reports, so I highly recommend them. I really like this comment from the landscape review saying that the natures of barriers identified through this analysis have changed little from the earliest reports reviewed in 2017 to the most recent 2024. So there's still much work to be done to address challenges. I think that's true, but nevertheless, I do think things have moved on, and so we're not exactly where we were 2017. I think it's a lot more work to build on, and a lot more understanding of what data sharing means. I mentioned that we sponsored a number of research projects and champion studies. This is a list of them all. Again, haven't got space to go through all of those, but we tried to cover all the areas that we're interested. So water, transport, energy, and within transport, we did road, rail, and aviation. Um, uh, and then 3 in energy, particularly looking at, or actually all of them were looking at various aspects of energy transition to renewable energy largely, and also particularly looking at that resilience of those systems to weather events. So different aspects of those things of those areas in those studies. Storms and soft remote kind of represented sort of our watery environment. So storms looking at waste management. Sorry, soft remote looking at waste management, and storms. I'll talk more about storms in a minute because it's actually quite a broad study. And then the 3 champion studies I've already mentioned: one in urban transport, one in road transport, and the other in water systems. Uh, so, and to pick out some examples, the champion study that the University of Bristol did, Sam and Theo down in Bristol did, was looking at urban mobility schemes. So where we have electric bikes or electric scooters in cities, and people use them to move around, hire them to move around. They collect a huge amount of data in those. So this is in the Bristol and Bath area. Huge amount of data collected by the operators about the rides, all down to an individual ride level data. So the snapshot at the bottom is sort of what you get about a ride, and there are a vast number of research questions that could be answered by making this data available to researchers. So the Sam and Theo ran a workshop down in Bristol where they brought together people from all kinds of different departments, and they came up with more than 30 different types of research questions that could be this kind of data could help investigate. So and that might cover things like crime, road congestion, road traffic collisions, things like social inclusion, maintenance, road maintenance, that is, all kinds of different questions that people came up with. So people are very ingenious when it comes, oh, here's a data set, what can we use it for? They're very ingenious in doing that. However, the real blocker came in that even though the local authority and the operator companies were very, very willing to take part in this and very willing to try and enable this data sharing of data, it got really, really bogged down in data sharing and process. And because this is down to individual level of individual users, you can track where people are. You can, even if they're anonymized, you can work out that there's likely to be people on a regular route, maybe going from home to work every day. So you can actually get quite a lot of personal information from this if you try hard enough. So they're very, very wary about the security around this, very complex and extended data sharing agreement process and how that is actually enforced. So what they're looking towards proposing is we should be looking at some trusted research environment for this. And then if you want to scale this up to cover more cities, you need to expand that to a national scale with some common data repositories so you can compare and contrast. So so you can see the requirements starting to come out, and this theme of trusted research became to come out quite strongly. Second example, storms, from led by the University of Birmingham, but also involving the British Geological Survey and the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. This was looking at underground infrastructure, so pipes, cables, sewage pipes, water pipes, gas pipes, which run underground, electricity cables, telecommunication cables, all the wide variety of different underground infrastructure you get, connecting infrastructure around. It's very vulnerable to weather conditions, not just extreme weather like floods, droughts, and sort of floods, and where things can get washed out, and get sinkholes and breakages but also from sort of like slightly longer term things like droughts, drying out soil, or cold weather, freezing soil, or water saturating soil, and this can lead to breakages, and so that's where you get a lot of leakages uh, caused by that attrition caused by extreme weather, those weather conditions in the soil. So what they were doing was trying to build a new risk model to look at this, to work out where that buried infrastructure was most likely to break. So working with the BGS for soil information, and Centre for Ecology and Hydrology for hydrological information about where the water flows. So again, here we've got a case of you're really combining data from lots of different sources. They worked with particularly with natural gas suppliers, Cadent Gas and National Gas, for this. So combine their data with geological data for soils and hydrological data, the combinative data sets, to produce these risk models. Uh, to do that. And I produced a really nice risk model to do this. And they're doing it on gas, could equally be applied to water or sewage. So, and part of that, they came across a number of data barriers, data sharing, security and sensitivity concerns. Just exposing their asset locations, that's very sensitive, can be very sensitive information about where vulnerable assets are. Operational priorities, suppliers like Cadent Gas, they're busy running the business. They don't necessarily got the time to run over to work in with data sharing and work with researchers. There's a need for aggregation and anonymization, so there's confidentiality requirements, there's liability and governance issues, and technical barriers around data quality, resource constraints, and inconsistent sort of user standards. So how do you combine data together with different standards? So lots of barriers coming up to potentially impact this sort of project. And the final example I will give from the case studies was brines. So this was looking at vulnerability of particularly renewable infrastructure, renewable energy infrastructure to extreme weather, like Storm Arwen, which took down lots of wind farms, and how we might add resilience to the future challenges to the UK power network for future climate scenarios. So looking at future climate data like UKCP18, climate projection data, and producing some kind of redundancy and resilience model for that to look at the things. Again, really good benefits from collaborating and using things like DAFNI platform to share and combine things together. However, similar barriers coming up, data and access, licensing, limitations on how you download data, and lack of cultural skills. The other thing I really like about this project is they weren't only sort of consuming data, but they're also producing data back to the community. So Brian's has made available a number of data sets that it's refined from data that it's gained um, uh, from sources such as the four institutions given below. Uh, uh, no, I can't say it, DNES, National Grid, Ofgem, and the Climate Change Committee. So making some data much more available and much more usable for the community afterwards. So this is a kind of feeding back, publishing data publication from research for future use. So that's some examples of the sorts of studies we were looking at. We also did some work on what components might we need to build a future data infrastructure. How would you actually support a data infrastructure for data sharing? So it was around sort of four different areas. I'll start from the bottom of this slide because it kind of works on a stack. So firstly, how we federate data infrastructure together. You have different data and computational resources in the infrastructure doing different things like DAFNI and for example DAFNI, which looking at national infrastructure data, Jasmine working very much in the environmental science domain. How do we make those things better work together to support data sharing, data access, and data use? So we're looking at integrating DAFNI and Jasmine together, looking at cloud services, federating AI. So we did some initial studies on that. And on top of that, well, with a lot of the issues we've seen are around trust um, and security, how do we increase that level of trust and assurance in the digital infrastructure? And we particularly during the course of the project began to look or realize anyway that we need to look more around trusted research environments. A lot of existing work in this area. We didn't do a lot of work this in detail in this particular study. We didn't have capacity, but we are starting to talk to other projects who are doing this. And I think this is, certainly an area that we need to investigate more. It's already came up in, as I mentioned, in that urban mobility project. It could come up also in the Storms project where we're accessing sensitive data on underground infrastructure. And then on top of that, we realized that we need a better way of making data interoperable. So looking at things like the metadata within DAFNI, how it actually works, how do we standardize those things, how do we build more standardizations, how do we work with other um, initiatives that are looking at data integration and data interoperability standards, of which there are many. And what sort of support do we provide for things like ontologies? We need to have ways of expressing the semantics of our data. So we need to know what sort of ontologies would be useful. And on top of that, the sort of how do then people access data? How do you do data access and discovery services? Well, we've been looking very much at data indexing and discovery tools, so you can link different data sources together, and initially doing some work with APIs for data access for the energy data, energy data center, data service, sorry. So I won't go through all those in detail. I'll just give one example of a technical demonstrator, which is the energy ontology, where we did reviews and landscaping of where the ontologies are, and what ontologies are useful for energy modeling, because it's really important for multidisciplinary services. So we did a study in this, and whilst we felt that there's a lot of different isn't any common standards for this. There may well be things like open energy ontology that may well be useful for this. And we're looking to see how we can extend those things over time to cover other areas more broadly. And we know this is sort of work we'd like to continue on. So one of the reports is on energy ontology work. Okay, so to kind of where we are, to summarize in the last sort of 10 minutes, we gathered a huge amount of evidence. We did 7 workshops, 8 case studies, 3 champion study projects, a literature review and landscape report. We've covered right across the UK, many state groups. We created a huge amount of information. I think in total there was something like 180 different barriers, things identified. So we've taken along quite a while, so the last 3 months of the project, to kind of synthesize that all together into our final report. So we've been looking. So that's what we've been doing. So our final report is now out. We published it last month, and it's now available as an STFC technical report, and available here. Rather fetching orange color, golden color. And what we came up with was a vision, leading with a vision to develop a future data infrastructure for national infrastructure. What we might do in the future, or by we, I mean the community, in general, the research community, to support DINI, particularly to support researchers and how the researchers interact with the wider community. There are, as mentioned, there are quite a number of other data sharing initiatives. So we're involved in a data sharing working group that the Connected Basic Catapult run, for example, looking at data sharing more generally. We need to be interoperable with those other initiatives as well. We then kind of highlighted some of the benefits that we found for data sharing research, some of the barriers, discussed a little bit about some of the technologies we need to develop, and then made some recommendations on what we might do. So if you want to kind of look at what we've been, our conclusions are, please go and look at that report. And that report points to the wider collection of information that we've synthesized from all the different activities. There's a report for each one, so that's all available as well. So just a quick summary of some of that benefits. So we divided benefits into 3 different types of benefit. Sort of the immediate benefits. So this is this is immediate benefits in sharing data. It enables more research, and maybe that seems a bit obvious, but it give people data sets like that ride sharing data set. People come up with really smart ideas, really clever ideas about how they do it. So it really can provoke more in research and innovation, and in a collaborative way. So we can get more collaboration and more interoperability in that research, and particularly collaboration back with industrial and government partners. And then the effect, also by making data available, making it more freely available, we get more transparency and trust. We can see the data, people can see the data, people can understand what's in it, and they can, with suitable acceptance of its limitations, we can get more trust from society in general, as well as from research from that making that data available. And that those immediate benefits would then have effects down the line on the impact, on the effects on the output of that research and how that research gets used. So we get more, better policy development and better evidence-based decisions. We can improve the accuracy and validation of results by validating them against real data, and we can get improved operational efficiency and monitoring from it. We get better ways to monitor systems in the actual practice, and those effects can then lead on to broader, wider impacts on policy in our whole nation or whole world even. Particularly, so we emphasize sort of 3 different areas. society, particularly around things like resilience and security in response to emergencies. Those are things that affect society as a whole, but also public engagement, so that notion of trust and understanding of what's going on in different sectors. Impact on the economy, so that innovation and operational efficiency can try, improve economic effectiveness, and potentially on the environment. So things like carbon reduction, water quality, better data, better research can lead to impacts, better impacts on results on the environment. So there's that chain of impact we expect to see. Then coming on to the barriers, as I said, we saw a lot of barriers, so we spent some time trying to divide them up. Towards the beginning of the presentation, I talked about the Deloitte report in 2017, dividing into these 5 areas. We've continued to use those 5 areas as the basis for it to categorize our different barriers we've seen. So privacy, security, commercial, cultural, and technical. So a division around those different things. So I'll give a little bit about each one of those. So legal barriers, probably the most loudest or clearest thing that did come out for the whole project was around legal and contractual concerns. This has really significant impact. Data sharing, making delays or even making it impossible to do at all. It kind of manifested in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's expressed in terms of the legislative and regulatory framework. Sometimes it's the complexities of data sharing agreements and the contracts involved around that. Sometimes it was things in terms of licensing or concerns around privacy. So a lot of worries about this can really stall progress. So the quote from the Mars project below says that, the commercial sensitivity and legal complexity of the surrounding ownership has given us significant challenges. So we need to have, in our future DINI, we should have some recommendation that tries to overcome that. So we should try approaches to mitigate some of those legal barriers to get those data. This could include different things like reference data products that already have sort of clearance or clear access conditions, synthetic data sets, help and advice on data sharing agreements, for example. Security barriers. Well, this is kind of the flip side, if you like, the opposite to those legal barriers. Once you've got a legal agreement with data sharing, you need to have some way of respecting it. So you need to show that you have some trust and assurance that you can actually provide the safe and secure handling of the data. So you need some secure environment or place or processes that you can actually enforce those restrictions to be as open as possible, but as closed as necessary. So the Storms project came up with this. They want to have the protectiveness required for their records, so that they can have that assurance that they can share them. So a future DINI should provide some trusted space with suitable controls to allow users to access, explore data, and use it for further analysis securely. So again, this is why we're beginning to look at trusted research environments. Commercial barriers. So this is about costs. Sharing data can seem to be expensive, and this still came up very, very loud. It can seem to be burdensome. Researchers sometimes don't necessarily know what they want. They can ask lots of questions. It's not necessarily the job of the people providing the data to provide data. It can be seen as burdensome, and there's skills issues here as well. They don't always have the skills. So this came up in areas like the UCRIT data sharing workshops, where data sharing can be a burden. That can be seen as includes the time. Once you include the time and kind of cost. So what we should try and do in a future DINI is trying to reduce those costs. Again, by supplying reference data projects, providing data curation expertise that helps kind of regular standardized formats and provide quality data. Sorry. Cultural barriers. we met lots of really enthusiastic people, lots of champions of data suppliers, but they're not always representative. They sometimes do work in isolation. There's somehow a lot of, depending who you know in an organization, about whether you can get data. And people were nervous about supplying data as well, particularly worries about data quality. So the DAFNI, one of the workshops working with developed nations, um, people were expressing that worried of reputational damage of exposing problems or errors in data. So we should have some program of outreach and advocacy to work with the sector, more case studies to demonstrate the benefits and how, and how we might and demonstrate how we might mitigate some of those concerns that come from organisations. And then finally, technical barriers. Non-technical barriers, as I said, are often more prominent, but technical barriers are still a major impediment to practical data use, and about a third of the total barriers raised were technical. So this is about providing good data discoverability, good metadata, knowing what data there is, knowing what is available, knowing how you might use it. Lack of standardization. Well, there are lots and lots of standards, of course, but not always consistently applied, not always working together. So I think there's a lot more we can do on providing data standards and supporting that. And also quality. I mentioned quality in the previous slide. People worried about quality. It would be good to be able to have ways of be able to say how you publish data. So this came up in some of the workshops. People think about data in different ways. So the same kind of data may be recorded differently. So we should try to support some interoperability of data in a future DINI through some applications of some fair data standards. And we should work with others to help set those standards. So this is very much a community thing. Obviously, lots and lots of initiatives around happening this already. So summarize, I won't go through this slide, but we came up in total of 16 recommendations in total. As I said, it won't go through those. Please go and have a look. What we have tried to do though is fit it on to how you might build a future research data cloud. I mean, that was the remit of this was about research data clouds. So this is a sort of a picture of what the kind of things you need to do if you're going to build a research data cloud or what they call an open data research commons. So you need to fill in all these hexagons with activities, some of which are technical, like providing compute and storage, some of which are human or social, like engagement or governance structures. And this breakdown has come from the Research Data Alliance, who's done some sort of typology of how you actually go about this. So what we've tried to do is divide all our recommendations into these various categories and what we might do in each place. I think I've actually said quite a lot of these already, so I won't go over these again. But it is, help broker data sharing agreements for that rules of participation, providing secure computing environment, work with data providers and policymakers for good governance structures. That work with trying to more case studies for engagement, and the right sets of tools around federated trusted data repositories, so we can provide data indexing and discovery within some common interoperability standards environment. So what we've done is so we've kind of concluded by coming up with a vision, which is the sort of thing that we might see that might be provided into the future for a data infrastructure, for national infrastructure. And so what we recommend is such a DINI should coordinate research infrastructure and expertise to broker access to data from industry and government for use by research and the partners of research, to get that down the line impact. Provide access to data via a federated structure of trusted repositories, so that trust comes in there very loud and clear. Support common data interoperability framework to tie it all together. Not a single common standard to support them all, but a data interoperability framework so we can move data from one thing to another. Provide access to trusted computing resources. to sort of enforce that trust, perform analysis, to foster a network of communities of practice, and collaborate across all those different sector initiatives to build consensus. And I realize that I've only got 10 minutes, so I'm just the last couple of slides to say where we are at the moment. This program finished in March. We did a major showcase event, very successful event in March. We then did a presentation to DC at the end of March and produced our final report in 11th of April. So as I said, that's all available. We are publishing the background material from the study, so those reports are all available, and we're hoping to do some further synthesis. We hope there may be some journal papers or some other things we do over time, and a lot of the research demonstrator projects that they've shown are producing their own papers as well. But we are hoping to do some, what the following actions are. DC are currently reviewing the results. We presented that, and we're looking for feedback from them. In the meantime, we don't want to, let this drop this idea. So we are kind of hoping that we can continue to develop partnerships and planning and advocacy to work with the community, to work to take this to funders and others about how we might take this forward. We are thinking about how we might do some pilots within DAFNI environment within our current program, seeing how we might fit that in, perhaps. I think we would want to start to do some further work on the data interoperability framework, again, working with cross-community initiatives in this area, other people doing work in this elsewhere. And we're also discussing about groups of other people on how we produce this Trusted Research Data Cloud platform, if you like, particularly the DARE UK initiative, which is an initiative around in the UK around federating trusted research environments, largely working in health and medicine, where there's a lot of existing experience in setting up trusted research environments, and how we might apply some of that work into the more infrastructure engineering space, where the trust concerns are rather different, and also continue to develop that DAFNI Jasmine bridge. So I think I've got just to finish, and I think I've still got a few minutes for a few questions. So a lot of people got involved in this. It was quite a short project, but quite an intense and very active one. So a lot of people involved. This is some of the key names and all the different organisations. So a big thank you to all of those and all of those workshop participants who took part. Okay, I think that. Whoops, didn't mean to show that one. Thank you. That's my last slide. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound like you were in a tunnel.
Oh, no. So we have had a couple of questions come in. So the first question, will there be any link up with the National Energy System Operator Data Sharing Initiative? Certain data would require tight controls.
Yeah, I was finding about them yesterday. We haven't. They're on our roadmap to talk to. I think I'd safely say that. We didn't talk to them specifically during the study, but we certainly know aware of them, and I know would be a group of people we would certainly love to, we'd want to talk to more. We've talked to people in the water industry. We've talked to people around underground infrastructure, lots of other people. But yeah, further contacts definitely would want to talk to more.
Perfect, thank you. The next question, do you plan to work with groups and themes outside of your own? There is a federating services group that run and deal with various software for access and authentication for various experiments.
I'm not sure what you mean by that group. So which group specifically would that be? I'll ask the question back. I'm not Federating Services Group. So which organisations doing that Federating Services Group? Maybe the questioner could provide a bit more information there. Because yes, certainly we wouldn't want to work as all. We'd like to work with um, parts of the digital research infrastructure. So we're very keen on working with the NERC parts in particular. The authentication part is. Oh, right. Okay. So this is inside. Yeah. Yes, of course. This is inside our department, of course. Um, yeah, of course. I mean, that is part of our foundation. So, of course, to that one.
Perfect, thank you. If there's any further questions, if anyone could post them in the Q&A, please. We'll just give it a minute and see if you get any more questions coming in.
Okay.
No, so I don't think there's any more questions. I'm guessing you covered everything. Oh, we've had one.
What links can we share? Well, we can certainly share the link. I will put, if you didn't manage to pick up the link to our final report, I'll put that in the chat immediately so you can pick that up now. That refers to all these other reports. I know that. Whoops, sorry, I'm getting a bit. We are gradually putting the others online. Some of them are more available, but I think available immediately. All right, yes, beat me to it. Susie's trying to find it. Yeah, so that's the link to the report. That refers to, yeah, that's the EPUBs link. There's also a digital object identifier link, which is this one. Oh, I can't seem to, where did it go? Oops, here we go. Yeah, that's digital object identifier link. That refers to all these other documents, and if they're not available already, if you're interested in particular ones, we can make them available online. We are just doing some Q&A and actually trying to sort out where they're going to go on the website.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, with 4 minutes to go, there's no further questions coming in. So thank you to everyone for joining us today. We'll be uploading this recording to our website. Our next webinar is going to be on Wednesday, the 25th of June with Professor Richard Dawson, and hopefully we'll see you all there. Thank you again, Brian.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.